Well, South Africa's winter promises to be colder and darker with an even more constrained power system. Eskom board Chair Mpho Makwana saying, and you heard some of that in that briefing, that high electricity demand will lead to more power cuts. The utility saying it may implement up to stage 8 rolling blackouts this winter season, and Eskom saying it's due to some of the Kusile units that are still out and one from the Medupi power station. Reiterating, by no means will the country be subjected to a total system collapse or country-wide blackout. Eskom saying it anticipates a minimum of stage 5 load shedding for most of the winter, but as you've seen, the trends showing there's a strong possibility of stage 8 over July and August. Let's talk about Eskom. Let's talk about that briefing today. And joining us in conversation is former Eskom CEO Jacob Maroga. Good evening, Jacob. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. So I want to start with our question of the day, which you would have seen. Are you convinced that Eskom can avoid a total grid collapse? What's your short answer to that?
Good evening, Iman. Yes, I think it's important to separate load shedding and blackouts. Blackout is when it's an uncontrolled collapse of the grid, and you actually have a blackout that may last a few days to bring the grid up. My sense is that there's a low likelihood of a total grid collapse, because what Eskom is doing with load shedding is to manage demand and supply in such a way that you get a stable grid, and the stable grid is measured by what is called the system frequency. As long as the system frequency is close to 50 hertz, the grid will continue to operate. So my short answer is that there's a low likelihood of a total grid collapse in South Africa soon.
All right, so you talking about Eskom managing the supply and and demand, but what they're using is only what's available in the system currently. Is there not the risk that whatever is available in the system right now might also become vulnerable?
Well, what they're doing now is that they're doing load shedding. Load shedding is manual reduction of demand to match supply. But there's still more layers protection. This layers is that if the system frequency goes much lower than 50 hertz, there will be automatic things that triggers the dropping of load, bigger chunks of loads, maybe towns, factories, to protect the grid from going into a collapse. So there are still layers of protection that will avoid a total uncontrolled collapse of the grid.
That should be at least, some comfort for us and I suppose investors as well. Let's come to this board meeting. And just a quick aside, have you read Andre de Ruyter's book?
Yes, I have read Andre de Ruyter's book, yes. Okay,
so we'll come back to some questions emanating from what he's outlining in the book. But the Eskom board is planning to act against de Ruyter. They say he's broken trust in the most repulsive manner. They're talking about certain elements of the business, the audit and risk, arms of the business, pursuing action against Andre de Ruyter. What actions should they be considering?
Well, I don't know what actions they'll be considering, but let me say this. It is not good for a company as important as Eskom to continuously be in conflict with its either current CEOs, boards. So I think probably since 2007, there hasn't been a CEO that left and finished his term. So it doesn't augur well for Eskom. My wish is that people can come in, have their contract, finish it well, and there's no drama when people leave, irrespective of what the issues are, because every time there's drama, it takes a long time to stabilize the management, to stabilize the organization, and especially with the organization which is as critical as Eskom in its current state. You'd expect that things like management drama could be avoided and things can be done elegantly without any drama that destabilizes management.
It's quite elegant the way that you're putting it, Jacob. Would you say then that de Ruyter's actions, in a way, are destabilizing to Eskom and have destabilized it further?
Well, look, I think a dialogue between Eskom management and de Ruyter to make sure that management don't get distracted by things that have happened, I think will be better than chasing each other and creating a distraction from an important action of stabilizing Eskom. That will be my caution.
You know, it's so interesting, this relationship that Director narrates in his book, especially, you know, if you use the example of his poisoning, his account of his poisoning and the reaction of Minister Pravin Gordhan versus Board Chair Mpho Makwana. Pravin Gordhan, you know, commiserating with him, I think, and even going to visit him in a Hermanus to kind of talk to him and expressing real concern compared to this text message that he says he got from Mpho Makwana, which basically said, so sad. And then you see in Parliament this week, Pravin Gordhan, you know, kind of routing Director for what he's done, and a kind of change in attitude that, you know, compared to what we read in the book. And it's very telling about this relationship between, you know, the incumbent and government. What did you read into that?
Again, Iman, I don't want to comment into the details, but what I want to caution is the posture from both sides. Here we have an organization called Eskom. For the past 16 years, it has been in turmoil in terms of leadership. I think it is not good for the director, for the board, for anybody to be going into an intensive public spat. There possibly are ways of managing and dealing with these things so that the board, the management can focus on the most critical thing to stabilize Eskom.
When you recall, you know, because this relationship is an important thing, when you recall yours, you know, with the ministers responsible for oversight and, you know, and policy on Eskom, what was that like?
Well, I think it's part of the problem. It's part of the problem where, you know, CEOs, boards don't leave state-owned enterprises in peace. You live in a cloud. There's spats, and my view is that I think that must change, irrespective of the issues. That must change. I mean, you can go into the details of things, whatever it costs, but this environment, I mean, it is not happening at Eskom only, SAA, Transnet, Denel, in many state-owned enterprises. There is no elegant way of people separating. There's always dust, and that dust does not do well for the enterprise, for government, and for society.
Well, we certainly can't afford that dust or rocks, as it turns out in this case in Eskom, especially at this stage in its history. Have you been approached? I mean, I know that your name's been bandied about here and there, but, you know, has anyone talked to you directly about coming back? You have the benefit of hindsight now, and you have the benefit of other people's experiences in trying to deal with this gargantuan, you know, beast that is Eskom. Have you been asked? Has somebody reached out to you to come back as CEO?
Well, I've been there, and I think there are many other people that can step in. I think let's leave Eskom to finalize its processes. But I'm contributing in many other ways, and there are many ways to contribute to this issue other than being the CEO. So I'm happy with whatever roles I'm playing currently in assisting in dealing with the crisis in South Africa.
Well, I didn't hear a clear yes or no.
You're not going to get yes or no.
If you had to go back, you know, or if you had to advise the person who wears this heavy crown, what would the first order of business be besides correcting the relationship between the CEO and government?
Well, the first thing is that this is not a one-man hero type assignment. This is an assignment that requires a collaboration across all stakeholders, government, the board, executive, the whole supply chain ecosystem. So the attitude should be, I'm going in there and I need to mobilize all the forces to collaborate to solve the biggest issue in terms of power supply in South Africa. So that should be the attitude, because it's not really just only a technical job, it's a stakeholder relationship job. You need to be able to communicate and collaborate with all manners of stakeholders. And that should be the first attitude when you go into a job like this.
Did Andre de Ruyter do the country a service by writing, what has been described as a tell-all book, given, some criticisms about who he relied on for information? And I'm referring now to the 50 million rand investigation. You'd have heard some criticism of the people involved in that investigation, former apartheid operatives, or just the description around how riven Eskom is and how kind of apportioned it is to a mafia-like grouping of people who, from head to tail, have hollowed out Eskom. In sharing that with the country, has he done us in the way that he has done us a disservice or a service?
Well, it's unfortunate that it's creating a furore, and it's actually a distraction. But I'm sure as a CEO, there could be ways where you have a conversation with your board, with your shareholder, to share things that are important to turn around this organization, to turn around Eskom. There are better ways, in my view, to do it, because you've got access to all of these people. And it is my assumption that you need to actually make the assumption that everybody wants to solve the problem. So when you pick up things that you believe needs to be addressed, there's a better, effective way to communicate with your stakeholders so that you can collaborate with everybody to solve the problem. But when it appears as if you want to embarrass, you want to show up, people become defensive, and I don't think you become as effective as you could be if you collaborated with everybody with the view that everybody wants to solve the problem.
If you had your pick, the best pick to turn things around at Eskom, who would your money be on?
Look, I think it will be difficult. As I'm saying, there are people inside Eskom, there are leaders in South Africa who have run big companies. There are even people internationally who run big power systems. And for an assignment like this, we don't need to be restricted. We need to look at the best people we can get. And it's not only the CEO, but it's the entire Eskom ecosystem. You should be saying, because this problem is so serious to the economy, you don't need to spare any cent to go across the world and pick people that can come in and assist us in solving the problem.
All right, a novel idea to look outside South Africa's border to turn things around at Eskom. Thank you very much, Jacob Maroga, for talking to us tonight. That was the former Eskom CEO.